my name is Kyle Skates, and I'm a behavior analyst. I am privileged to be here today talking with Misty Bloom. This is our 2023 Jerry Shook Award recipient. This award honors the legacy of the late Dr. Shook, who founded and was the first CEO of the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. This award recognizes an individual has made substantial contributions to enhancing the value of sound professional credentials in the practice of ABA, and Misty Bloom definitely embodies that. I heard Misty give her acceptance speech in Seattle at our 2023 convention in March, and I left that experience and that speech feeling just so encouraged, and I turned to Tyra and said, everybody needs to hear what she just said. And so thankfully, Misty agreed to be here with us. Thank you, Misty.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, so this will be our first of hopefully many special highlights, and we're just thrilled that Misty could be here. She currently serves as the Director of Regulatory Affairs and the Chief Legal Counsel for the BACB. But Misty, you have been a part of the BACB team for a long time and really helped revolutionize our field. So I just want to go straight over to you. Could you share a little bit about your experience and history and your role at the BACB over the years?
Well, one of my favorite memories is when I first met Jerry Shook and Michael Hemingway. Michael Hemingway was a behavior analyst with the Florida Department of Children and Families, And Michael and Jerry came up to me when I was speaking at a conference for the parent organization that oversees the accrediting of certification entities. So Jerry and Michael came up to me afterwards and they said, here's what we're doing in Florida. We have created a certification entity, and that certification entity has access to, or will have access to, materials that were developed by the state of Florida to certify behavior analysts. And the first words out of my mouth were, well, I'm not so sure how you could do that, because this was a state program that was developed. What happened is the program that was developed by the state was developed to qualify to be an authorized provider for services. It was not a traditional professional licensing certification type program. Because of that, they didn't have an ethics code. They didn't have standards to discipline the professional. And they didn't have a process for keeping the job task analysis or the examination up to date with a field that was rapidly changing. In came the BACB. Jerry Shook had the foresight to say, let's go incorporate, let's certify behavior analysts, and let's help the state of Florida do what they have chosen to do. And in the meantime, there were other states who had heard about this great program in Florida and were interested in gaining access to the examination for individuals providing services in their states. So this was a win-win situation for everyone. Those words have stayed with me for my entire career. I've been with the BACB in one capacity or another since 1998, and I'm not so sure you could do that is clearly not entirely accurate, because we found ways to make it happen and ways to help ensure the growth of the profession as well as the growth of the field. One of the key concerns in any certification entity is that the examination and the content be current to the practicing professional. I don't know, Kyle, have you ever completed the job task analysis and filled out all of the questions about, do you do this in your role? Do you do that in your role? How important is this? That survey is the science behind certification and the examination content. And that role delineation type study is so critical to the field, as well as to the organization that accredits our certification programs. And they don't accredit the BACB, but they accredit the individual programs that we where we issue certificates, and specifically the BCBA, the BCABA, the RBT. And that study is the foundation for everything that we do being psychometrically valid. Mm-hmm. It also gives us legal defensibility. So let's go back in time now. We managed to take over what the state of Florida was doing. We updated the job task analysis. I was still external counsel at that time. Jerry Shook worked his magic and convinced me to come in-house with the BACB. And that was 2008. And look at where I am with any of my other clients, where almost every step was strategically planned. And so it was the teamwork. The board was doing what it was supposed to do in oversight and authorization. And Jerry was really, again, the best word for him is rainmaker. He had the idea, he had the vision, and he identified all of the steps that needed to be completed to get there. And he, along with Dr. Johnston, did a lot of just contemplating and thinking out what the future would look like for the profession, not just the BACB, but for the profession as a whole, as certification continued to take off and become popular. The original discussions did not include much about licensure because we needed to have the BACB established first, respected, and then about a decade, almost exactly a decade later, the first licensure bill appeared. A lot of credit also goes to some of the folks at Autism Speaks and the UNOMs, Lori and Dan, because it was really Lori who pressured the BACB to look into a model act, which now APBA is the parent of that model act. And Lori at the time, she was working with Autism Speaks, Lori Unum, and she said, well, we're asking these legislatures to approve insurance mandates. They want some assurance themselves that the individuals who will be able to bill for these services are qualified to do so. It was clear, the writing was on the wall, at least in terms of certain services, licensure was essential. And one of the key planning components from the BACB's perspective was that it not just be autism specific. And I don't know if you're familiar with New York, but they made that mistake of enacting an autism specific law that then had to be reopened and reconsidered for purposes of other disorders that could benefit from ABA services. And it's still, New York is still a very narrow law. It's limited to DSM-based disorders. There can still be a little bit of growth in New York.
Right. Well, I know I got to work with you a little bit over the past year being with the Georgia Association of Behavior Analysis, and we were thrilled to get our bill passed this past year with your guidance. So thank you so much.
And you did a great job of that too, moving that through. I know that you had some hurdles and you worked through every hurdle one step at a time.
Yes, absolutely. And it makes me think when you say teamwork about the BACB and Jerry Shook, I think GABA had that in our corner, that teamwork piece. And now you work with Jim Carr, who is another giant in our field.
So Jim has really, Jerry was wonderful at letting me excel in my area of practice and letting me be the best version that I could be of who I was then. Jim has been wonderful at helping me up my game. And in many ways, I get credit for the team at the BACB who's really doing a lot of the work that if I were trying to do it just by myself, which is my inclination, I am completely a self-driven person. But if I were doing it by myself, it would be somewhat muddled. And a good example of that, so I mentioned the Institute for Credentialing Excellence. I serve on their government affairs committee. I pitched a research project to survey all of the certification entities and ask them if they're written into licensure laws. And if they are, how are they written into the laws? Is it initial licensure only? Is it initial licensure and relicensure? Is it just the exam? Are they an exam for sale type structure, or is it the certification that's required for licensure? We had over 70 respondents. There were a few that responded to just a few questions in there, but we had over 70 respondents, which was an unheard of survey for certification entities that are written into licensure laws. And those questions, how they were asked and how they were answered and how that information was called together, that's not my area of expertise. Jim Carr oversaw how the final product looked. My area was to say, hey, let's explore this, let's explore that, let's see what a job task analysis might be for a director of regulatory affairs or government affairs. Jim was the one who said, okay, we have this question, this question relates to that question. So he really organized that research. In many ways, I feel as if I am better at what I do, and I'm able to achieve much more being a part of the BACB team, and specifically being under Jim Carr and supported by the executive department of the BACB.
That's amazing. I'm going off script again because
Go
I'm
for
hearing
it.
what you're saying, and I thought this during your speech in Seattle too. One thing that I admire about you as a leader, Misty, is you are constantly shining a light on other people. And that's hard to do. And that's not something we're seeing a lot in 2023 from other leaders. And I just wanted to compliment you on that and also say, how do you do that? How did you prioritize that as you developed your leadership skills? And how would you help young, new people in the field or newer to the field develop that skill and not be afraid to highlight other people?
So I've never been asked that question, and you're certainly off script here. I think that skill comes from gratitude. I recognize in many ways that my career would have looked very different, but for Jerry Shook, the initial board of directors, Judy Favell, who was an advocate for my coming on in-house when she was president, and some of the other presidents who have served since. I feel so grateful that I can be more than just an attorney or more than just a director of regulatory affairs, that I can be creative and have ideas, but I may not have the skill set to accomplish these research projects that I throw out to other people randomly. But what I do have is I have the support of individuals behind me, and I have the wonderful role models. There's some wonderful behavior analysts in the company, Molly Luke, just some amazing staff within the company. I don't know if you've met Holly Sinyuk, or as we know, Tyra moved on, but I had guidance from behavior analysts. And they helped me. I think you heard in my speech how I said at one point I was very reluctant to collect data around disciplinary cases. That you look at these cases on a case-by-case basis. One would not necessarily correlate with another. And behavior analysts changed me with that notion and showed me how data could be collected and how processes could be modified based on that data. And that was very powerful. So my career has been humbling in many ways, because I've recognized that the traditional training of an attorney, for example, is not necessarily consistent with the science of applied behavior analysis. But being an attorney and recognizing the science and benefiting from that science, I see the value. And for me, it changed my behavior. I went from attorneys don't collect data to the extent that I was being asked to collect data to, oh, can we get some data on this? And what if we look into so now I sit on another committee and I'm very much the person who's asking for more research or more resources and looking very closely at what the needs might be for whatever the topic is that we're addressing.
Yeah, that's amazing and really neat, and I think speaks to you, but also to those mentors that you mentioned that you're following these behavior analytic strategies too, and that's really encouraging, neat to see. And now I feel like our field really is starting to understand the importance of regulation and licensure. Well, not only starting, but are really embracing that. How do you speak with people who maybe don't understand the importance of licensure or understand the importance of regulation for our field or any field? How do you kind of break that down to be more applicable for them?
Okay, I'm going to answer your question, and then I'm going to answer another question you didn't ask, but that relates to that.
Okay.
So the first one about understanding licensure, you had a support system behind you. You had APBA, its prior leadership behind you. You had the BACB, although we were only able to do so much. We generally don't interfere with licensure. We protect our credentials. We try and ensure that any licensure bill is consistent with BACB practices. A good example is there was one licensure bill that well, it was actually regulations that were enacted that said we do the background check. We don't do the background check, but sure enough, written into regulations in one state, it said the BACB does the background check. So the key component for behavior analysts in dealing with licensure is that there has to be accuracy in the final bill enacted, and recognizing that there will be turf wars. There will be efforts to protect billing codes. There will be efforts to protect certain practices. There are individuals who are threatened by new licensure just because it's new regulation. We have a huge trend right now for deregulation. So did I sufficiently answer your first question? Which is going to understanding the importance of licensure and accuracy in licensure, and that licensure can be a wonderful thing for you as a professional. I guess I will elaborate on that a little bit and say that licensure doesn't just protect your turf. It protects you from efforts by other licensing boards to say, no, you're engaged in the unauthorized practice of whatever the other licensing board may be. So it protects you as a practitioner. It protects the consumer in terms of the delivery of services, as well as jurisdiction over unlicensed practitioners. The BACB does not have jurisdiction over unlicensed practitioners, provided they aren't using our credentials. So that really needs to be an act of this state regulatory body. All right, so let's go to the question you didn't ask me. But in this era of deregulation and the juiciness of licensure, why do I think behavior analyst licensure has been so successful? And it's because it has been predominantly driven by behavior analysts who are planners, who are strategic, who don't want to just fumble into a licensing law, who know that they're going to need to ensure there are sponsors so that they have a legislature that will be friendly to hearing the law, as well as a governor, if a governor's signature is required, that the governor is friendly to new regulation. They need to have a consumer base in the state where licensure is being passed that will say, no, we want licensed professionals. We want to make sure whoever's providing these services has met certain minimum standards. I I am still stunned that laws have passed in 36 states. I mean, you refer to it as me being successful. I refer to it as the field being successful. It is individuals within a state who see an opportunity, who research, who contact APBA, who get the Model Licensing Act, who say, hey, what do we need to do? Because again, the BACB is only able to do so much with regards to licensing law. I will clarify questions about our certification. I will clarify questions about our exemption status. I will clarify questions and answer questions about the accreditation of our individual programs. But I'm not a lobbyist. I have no intention to be a lobbyist. I give them great respect, but it's not an area in which I wish to practice. But I love doing regulatory affairs. And it seems like you're catching the bug, or you caught the bug when you were working in Georgia on the bill, that regulatory affairs is a big picture item. It's how do you support the regulator? It's not just getting the law. Once you have the law, how do you keep the law? Are there some sunset provisions that are going to put that law at risk? Are there rogue regulations? It's amazing how some laws pass that are perfectly clear, but then the regulations come down the pipeline and they're a little bit muddled. So it's one of those situations of nurturing the entire regulatory process. I'm going to take a quick segue here and say a little bit about what I do with licensing boards. One of the things that I enjoy doing the most is I will convey information to representatives of licensing boards about upcoming changes to BACB standards. I'll monitor certain laws if I know that there's a sunset provision coming. I will, for anybody who's listening and doesn't know, sunset just means a law has to be reauthorized after a certain number of years. In some states, it's mandatory by statute that every professional licensure law has to be reviewed for whether or not it's still current, still necessary, still performing its intended functions. I enjoy communicating directly with the regulators. I enjoy speculating with regulators. I enjoy trying to offer creative solutions to regulators. I enjoy their growth and development. One example I gave in my speech at APBA was to talk about some of the innovations that have happened in regulation. I know there's one regulatory board that is working on basically a continuing education type jurisprudence review. So for individuals who are licensed, they'll have to complete, hopefully, if this gets passed, they'll have to complete certain online training to ensure that they know the laws applicable in their state. So one of the things I got to do was to survey the regulators to say, do you have a jurisprudence exam? What do you have on the exam? Do you include mandated reporting provisions? Do you include just your licensure and regulatory provisions? It is fun for me to see how innovative some of these regulators can be. One state, and I give them kudos because I never even thought of this, gives CE for individuals, or gave CE, I should say, and still does, for individuals who attend their licensing board meetings. They could get continuing education. So I then went back to leadership in the BACB and said, okay, well, let's reach out to the other licensing boards and let's see how many we can get to be type 2 CE providers who could then offer CE that would qualify for BACB recertification merely by attending the meeting of the state licensing board.
Wow.
And it's these fun developments that are happening in the field right now that we're going to see a lot of growth in regulation in the next decade and innovative regulation.
Wow, that's really neat. I didn't know about that CE for licensure meeting, so that's
Yeah.
smart.
And
Like
a
that.
few of the licensing boards now have taken us up on this and are now, they have a type 2 CE provider authorized within their licensing board, because it's this opportunity is most available to a licensing board that has behavior analysts serving on the licensing board in terms of how we structure type 2 CE.
Mhm. Yeah, awesome. Well, Georgia's board is forming this summer, so we're thrilled. Yep.
And
Okay.
have them reach out. And there's always, I'm enjoying right now a few of the states that were enacted the last 2 years are really getting close to finalizing the regulations, and it's just fun. This is just really fun to watch the regulatory arena grow and to see the regulators also communicating with one another, saying, hey, well, we do it this way and we do it this way. And there are a lot of options out there available to the profession and those who regulate it.
Great. So you've shared a lot about what's exciting going on in the field, what's fun. I love that you use that word. I love that you've been doing this for 30 years,
Yeah,
right?
30 plus, and it's still fun.
And it's still fun. So that you're doing a lot right. That's encouraging to hear. What are some of your concerns about the future of the field, though? And does this growth make you nervous at all? Are you excited by it still? Or are there things about the field that you're worried about or weary about for the future?
So the growth of the field does not concern me as much as changes in the overall regulatory environment. I will say that I am surprised at how quickly the field has grown. And I will say that I am also pleased that licensure has been so successful, but I attribute that to the organization and strategies employed by those who were proponents for licensure. What concerns me and what I spoke about in my acceptance speech are legislative initiatives that would dictate our standard requirements. So folks, if they want to go look up Missouri House Bill 489, it's a bill that it would impact the ability of a certification entity written into licensing law, such as the BACB, from requiring DEI content or education. Well, if you have your code, you can look there, 1.07, nice little title, Cultural Responsiveness and Diversity. So any educational program in the state or any individual wanting to be licensed in that state could have a basis for objecting to the teaching of the code or any questions related to 1.07 of the code. Well, we require a 45-hour ethics course, and this is very telling. So now we're starting to get into the legislature substituting its judgment for the judgment of subject matter experts. And you may recall that I had mentioned the survey process and the role delineation study and the job task analysis or exam content. It gets different titles in different arenas. But I had mentioned the extensive survey that goes behind that to ensure that the examination and the content is psychometrically valid. Well, we also employ subject matter expert groups for something as simple as the ethics code. We don't just randomly at the BACB staff get together and say, let's revise the code and do this. It's a very expensive process. Individuals are selected on the basis of being diverse, as well as what expertise would they bring, as well as consumer representation in the developing of the standards, that then a report goes to the board of directors, and the board of directors will approve the report or will ask for it to be reevaluated by subject matter experts well established within the credentialing industry. This is what the program accreditor requires us to do with our standards. And now we have a legislature that if this legislation passes in Missouri, it will say that we may not require new behavior analysts training in educational programs to learn DEI content. We may not require continuing education to address DEI content. We may not in any way ask questions on the examination about DEI content. And so the legislature would be substituting its judgment for the judgment of the subject matter experts. Now, when you think of that in some professions, DEI content, I'm actually hard pressed, as I was about to give you an example and I said, I can't imagine an example where DEI content wouldn't be relevant in the professional delivery of services. But it's one of those scenarios where, particularly when you're dealing with certain populations who may not be verbal, or when you're dealing with intensity of services in homes that may require even more cultural sensitivity than you might expect in a clinical environment when you're not going into somebody's individual home to provide services for lengthy periods of time. You're looking at a scenario where DEI training and education is even more critical in the field of applied behavior analysis. And I could make that claim regarding any of the subspecialty areas that we list on our website.
Interesting. Wow.
It is. It's very surprising. Times they are changing. I think that's how I began my acceptance speech.
That's right. Well, I just appreciate your passion and your advocacy for the field and for the consumers of applied behavior analysis. I feel just personally thankful to meet you and to talk with you and to be humbled by all the amazing work you do. And there's so much I still have to learn as a behavior analyst, but also as an individual. And just thank you for taking the time to share and to have this dialogue. And hopefully other people in the field will learn something from our conversation and decide to get involved and to support the field as a whole, not only just their day in and day out.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate you speaking with me. And I also appreciate the support that APBA gives to those associations that are considering licensure or working on licensure or encountering bumps along the way, even when they have licensure that's been enacted. Again, APBA serves a very important role that I'm unable to serve in my capacity with the BACB. I'm very limited in what I am able to do with regards to legislative initiatives. So I appreciate the service of APBA to step in and to fill that gap.
Me too. I always say I'm a fan first of APBA. So
You got it. I agree.
Well, thank you so much, Misty. We appreciate
Certainly.
you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.